Alright guys, we're moving to arrays. Now I am quite sure you've had the concept of arrays before. Everybody took Java 1, you probably had arrays in it. Probably had it in fundamentals of programming or whatever. So you know what an array is. An array is just I shouldn't say list, but it's a collection of data. It's a sequential collection of data. This says it's a limited version of a class. I don't know if I would say that it's a limited version of a class. In this language, arrays are stored or referenced by the array class, which gives you a couple of functions. In C++, you couldn't ask the array for how large it was, how many elements there were in it. In Java, you can. You can say, what's your length? And it'll tell you a length, just like a string will, right? But in general, it's a sequential ordering of items. You can declare an array of whatever type you want. Strings, ints. You make a car class, cars, rats, whatever. They can be reference types or they can be primitive types. This one is stored, this one's full of primitives, ints. When you access them by their index number. 0 is the first. N minus 1, where n is the length, is the last. Since this is an array of 5, you can only go up to 4, but 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually 5 elements. If you try to access anything past that, it'll generate an error, it'll throw an exception, and your program will stop running unless you are trying to handle exceptions. So when you declare an array, you give the type, you give the square braces. If you're a C++ programmer and you really like putting the square braces there, yeah, that'll work, but don't do that. Do it like a Java programmer. And then you give it a name. And if you want to, right on the spot, you can allocate it. Right? Here they're asking how many phone numbers do you want to enter, right? They're asking how many, and then they're allocating it to that size with the new keyword. But if you weren't going to do that, and you just wanted to set it equal to 10 or something like that, long phone list is equal to new long, and you can say I want 10 elements in it. And it might be even kind of neat to stick that in a constant or something so that you could refer to it. Final int phone list length, right, is equal to 10. And then you could use that variable, that constant, to declare it. And then whenever you need to know the length of it, you could use that variable. That's a trick that that's how you do it in languages that don't keep track of the array length, like C and C++. More modern languages that do wrapped classes around them, like C# in this one, you don't really have to do that. Still, makes it kind of nice, maybe, to have a nice, cute name for the length of the array so that when you write your loops or whatever, you can do that. So that's the syntax for declaring an array and allocating the array. When you declare the array, you're just creating a reference. Reference to an array object. The array object doesn't actually contain the class, the data, until you do that, until you do the new. It's just a reference variable until you do that. And we've talked about what happens when you have a reference variable. It's pointing to memory. So double, work hours, string, names. And when you're creating these, you can also populate them, right, as you create them, right? This creates an array of length 3. Once it's declared, that's it. That's its limit. Not like Python where you can append values to it. It's a fixed length. If you want to append values to it, you use something else other than an array. You use an array list. So this is an example of using an initializer list. to fill to create the array that this references. When you do that, you don't use the new operator. If you do use the new operator, you specify the size, right? Int x equals new, int, and then inside the square braces you say how many ints you want. Initial values. When you create an array, the values inside the array get set to 0. Unlike some languages like C++, where you have no idea what's stored in that array, and the first thing you need to do is to 0 it out. So in all possible permutations of it, whatever a 0 is according to that type. If it's an integer, it's a 0. If it's a floating point, it's 0.0. If it's a Boolean, it's set to false. And if it's a reference, because we can create like arrays of rats, right, then all the references are null until something, is created and stored in it. And we did a little bit of that last week.
For a string, would it also be null?
Right, a string is also a reference, that's correct. Strings are an unusual type because they are fixed as well. They're called immutable objects. But right, they can be strings. A string is an array, an array of strings is an array of references as well. And we can prove that. Let's create today's fun project, which is lecture. Probably tell just by doing most recent. Why is there no recent projects, just recent files? It's grayed out. Whatever. Okay. We are on F, looks like. Alright, I'm always fond of removing the package statement. That makes it slightly easier for me to grade your work if you remove it as well. So if you happen to be using NetBeans, then backspace over that and then tell it to move the class to the correct folder. Alright, let's make an array of strings. String names equals, except I did that wrong. That just creates one variable. How do I indicate that it's an array? Right, squares here. And then I can populate it with an initializer. 3 names. Alice, Bob, and Chris. Like that. And I'm going to print them out. System.out.println. Wait. Why don't I use a for each loop? I don't know why I was starting off with a print. So, for parentheses string v for value, something like that, or string s colon names for every string in the names array. String s colon names close parentheses. Let's print that s out. System.out.println parentheses s. Just saves me from having to create an index counter and using it by index, which is just about as easy. It just takes 10 more characters to type. So this has got data in it. But if it's just an array without an allocation, if we just declare it but don't fill it with any data, string colors equals new string square brace 3 in square. This looks terribly like we have created 3 strings But no, all we have done is create an array that can hold 3 strings. Right now we have 3 nulls. Nulls are just 0, indicating that we haven't put anything into the array yet. So let's prove that. For parentheses, and let's use an integer. Let's use an index to do it. Int I is equal to 0. I is less than colors.length. No parentheses after it, unlike if you want the length of a string. Semicolon I plus plus. And now again I'm going to do system.out.println, but it's going to be colors subscript I. System.out.println parentheses colors subscript I in subscript in square brace in parentheses semicolon. All right. And so the first time it printed out 3 things. The second time it printed out 3 nulls. We have an array, but all that's in it is a series of zeros, indicating that there's no object that they reference. Since we didn't pre-fill them, we'd have to fill them by hand. And by hand, I mean we'd have to create some strings and stick them in there. Now, strings are a weird special kind of class. We don't have to use the new keyword to make one. So we could just do this. Colors subscript 0 equals, quote, red, end quote, semicolon. Colors subscript 1 is equal to blue, or green. Let's use green so we'd have RGB. All right, I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to copy this statement, these pair of statements. Copy those guys and paste them underneath that last statement about green. So I'm going to take my for loop, copy it, paste it. And we're going to see that now the array does have 2 pieces of data, and then the third element is null still. Null just meaning that it's a reference variable, but it doesn't point to anything in memory. Nothing has been allocated. This is what's known as a partially filled array. When you have a partially filled array, you kind of need to make sure you don't process elements past the end of the valid data. Right now, we have 2 good pieces of data, but the third one is junk. We don't want to print it out. Or if it was supposed to be a number, we don't want to, add it or whatever. So what we ought to be doing as we create these elements and we store them in it is we need to be calculating how many elements we've added. So above colors equals red, I'm going to declare a counter that indicates how many elements we've added to our array. So int elements count equals 0. I want it shorter than that, I'm sorry. Int e is equal to 0. How about int size is equal to 0? The size is short enough to type it over and over. And now here where we have colors, subscript 0 equals red, make that colors subscript size plus plus. And then change the 1 similarly. And I better slow down and make sure everybody's caught up. And then colors size plus plus again. So each time we add a new value to the array, we're increasing our counter that indicates how many elements we have. So we don't want to go out to colors length, right? That's 3. Instead, we want to go out to size, which is 2. So you're going to want to delete what I've highlighted here, colors.length, and replace it with size.
Too bad there's not a colors.filled or something.
Right, right. You could make your own class that inherited from the arrays class that would have an extra property. That'd be kind of neat. I never thought of that. That's a cool idea. All right, and now it only printed out red and green. It didn't print out our null. Could we have handled it another way? Perhaps. We could have had an if statement, right? If color subscript I not equal null, print it out. That just skips all the ones that are null. That's great if it's strings or if it's reference objects, but what if it's scores, right? It's supposed to be, test scores. Well, zeros are valid test scores, so you couldn't do if score equals 0, then skip it. You could fake it out by going through and filling it full of invalid values, right? You could say, you could fill your array out with, negative 99999s all the way down, and then when you were printing it out, you could do if grade not equal to negative 99999, then print it out or add it or average it or whatever. But this is kind of really the way that I would do it 99% of the time. All right, anybody getting syntax errors or wish that I would slow down so that you could catch up typing? Click on this little warning here and accept its offered change and marvel at what it does. No, it's not going to be as bad. Do that on the for each loop up at the top. See if it changes it dramatically. Then you're going to want to undo it. Right. If it gives you a warning on your for loop, it's offering to improve your code. If it doesn't give you the warning, then that's unusual, but just be happy because the changes that it's offering are pretty weird. I'm going to save my work, Control S. Alrighty, so for example, oh, it likes this for each loop. It didn't complain about that one. How about this one? Let's see what it does here. Use enhanced for loop to iterate the array. That's not bad. That's not bad. It did this, right? I like that change. I'm going to do it, but I like it. How about this one? Nope, it knows that that one can't be changed. Okay, what I was expecting it to do, it's not doing, which is make a really horrible looking loop. Good, didn't do it. Won't worry about it. So I mentioned this last time, but you can sort the array by making use of the arrays class. Arrays dot, and we see all sorts of things. We can make a copy of the array, or we can copy a sub portion of the array. We can do a binary search, which is a far more efficient search than if we searched it by hand with a linear search. Searching it by hand is when you just start at 0 and go out to the end of the array looking for the specific value. We could write a function that did that. The advantage of a linear search is that it doesn't have to be sorted. The disadvantage of a linear search is that it's far slower. So let's write a method that'll do a linear search on a string array. We're on an int array. Have we even created an int array yet? No, but we're going to write the function anyways. It needs to be static because we're calling it from a static method. Public static void linear underscore search. And it takes two things. It takes an array reference and a value to search for. So let's make the array reference first. That's the first. This is going to be the first parameter. Int subscript, and then we have to give it a name. How about AR, short for array, comma, int space value. That's what we're searching for. Now I'm going to add a comment here as to what this is going to do. Returns the index value of the element that matches. How about I delete the word value here because we have the word value twice in a sentence. I don't want it to be that ambiguous. Returns the index of the element that matches the value specified, comma, or -1 if it is not found.
So what is the void?
Yeah, you're right. Void was a real dumb idea. This better be an int because we want to return an int. Thank you very much. Save me some pain. Do make sure you make that change, or else you'll have to change it later. Public static int linear search. All right, since we need the index, we'd better not use a so-called enhanced for loop. In other words, a for each loop, because that doesn't give you the index. We need to make it a simple for loop, a typical for loop, an index-based for loop. So for parentheses, int space I equals 0, semicolon. And then i's less than ar dot length, semicolon, I plus plus. Now I need some kind of counter that's going to indicate what position we are, but I'm just going to be really lame and not have a counter that indicates where we are, and if we don't find it, we're going to return -1. So if parentheses ar subscript I equals value space return I. And then way down at the bottom, return -1. If we get through the loop without finding the value, we're going to just return a -1, and that's how the client code is going to know that it didn't find it. And we can test it out. I'm going to go to main and create an array of ints. Int data, int square braces, data equals, and I'm just going to initialize it with some numbers. But I'm going to make sure one of them is 100 because that's going to be the value that I search for. Whatever, right? Now I'm going to call linear search. So int found at, that's the position we found it at, equals linear underscore search subscript data, because that's the name of our array, and 100 is the value that I'm looking for. And then I'll have just some kind of if statement. If found at equals -1, we're going to print not found. So if parentheses found at equals -1 close parentheses, let's tell them system.out.println value not found, or we could have made it say 100 not found, right? Else I'm going to system.out.println parentheses quote value found at index space end quote plus found at close parentheses semicolon. All right. Since I'm looking for 100 and I know the 100's in there, I'm expecting it to tell me what index it's found at. And it found it at 3. And if I count them over, 0, 1, 2, 3, yep, that code worked. Now I'm going to change what I'm looking for to something that's not in the list. I happen to know there's no zeros in it. There's no negative hundreds. So I'm going to run it again and make sure it says value not found. And in fact, that's what it says. This is a good design pattern to kind of have memorized. You do this stuff over and over. You skip through an array trying to find something to do, and then if you find it, if you have a match, then you do it. Now if you have a database and you can just say, okay, tell me all answers, all elements that match, the social security number, then great. You're not going to be searching for the right value, but you may still be doing so. Find everybody in this zip code with an income of less than 300, right? But you tell it to bring in everybody from the zip code, and maybe you weren't able to specify that. Maybe the search condition cannot be bundled down into a single expression, so you get a larger set of data and then you iterate through them looking for it. Now, iterating through records, you probably wouldn't be treating them like an array, but same idea. Very common programming pattern, just looping through something until you find it and doing something with it. We could have kept searching, right? This is going to find the first element in the list. We could have just tucked this value away and then kept processing, getting to the end of the list, and that would find the last element that matches the value. But I wanted to write the shortest, simplest code possible, and that's why I went with that. Okay, I'm going to rewind a little bit so that we can talk about parallel arrays, max arrays, and searching. We've just done a search. We've handled that. Finding the max, we talked about that last time by searching. But instead we're going to make a function to do it. Excuse me, when I said we talked about it, we talked about doing it with a sort and then taking the last element, or sorting and taking the first element. Instead, we're going to write a function that looks remarkably like this. It's going to have a for loop, but it's going to return the maximum value, so we don't need to pass in a starting value. So public space static space int. Look, Vincent, I got it right. Find underscore max, parentheses, int, square braces, AR, short for array, open brace. We're going to set our value equal to the first element. If I was trying to make this fail safe, I would have this line of code in it. Don't type it, I'm going to erase it. But I would have if AR length is equal to 0, return -1, indicating that there was no maximum because the array is of 0 length, right? I could tack that in there. I'm not going to because it slightly clutters up what I consider more important, which is the for loop aspect of it. But you can make an array of 0 length, right? You could do this. AR is equal to new int 0. Why would you do that? I don't know, but you can wind up with an array of 0 length. Okay, so we need a for loop, but we need to find our largest value first, or we have to set a temporary largest value. So int largest is equal to the first element of the array. That's the one that would crash if it was an array of length 0. So AR subscript 0 in subscript. So for parentheses int I, short for index, equals, now I could start it at 0, but really we already know that I'm going to start it at 1. We're going to skip past the first of the array. It doesn't matter. I change it back to 0. I is less than AR.length, subscript, I plus plus. And if we ever find an element that's larger than our current largest, we set it equal to that one. Honestly, we could have used a for each loop, and it would be even cleaner. I'm going to do that. Sorry for rewinding. Just if you can use a for each loop, I would recommend doing so. So much cleaner. So for int e for element or v for value, I'm going to roll with e, colon AR for every int e in the array, for int e colon AR into parentheses. If, parentheses, that e greater than largest, in parentheses, largest equals e, like that. And then just return largest. To find the smallest, all you would do is check to see if e was smaller than whatever variable you are holding it in. I'm not going to write a find min. You ought to be able to figure it out. You just change that to a negative, a less than. What if we wanted to find the integer value of it? The index value of it, of that value. Well, you could just call linear search, right? We found the largest value. Tell me the position that matches it. But that only finds one of them. Like on the assignment, I think it's rainfall or temperatures. You could have multiple months or multiple weeks or multiple days with the same max rainfall. And a linear search would only find one of them. So now we need to talk about parallel arrays. Parallel arrays are when you, I'm so fond of this definition that I'm going to actually type it here. /star. Parallel arrays equals 2 or more arrays of the same length where the elements are linked by their index number. I think rather than stick this down in main, just for total weirdness, I'm going to create, no. I'm going to go and place it in main, even though it's away from here. I'm going to cut that comment and paste it down in main. It'll be the first thing I do in main. Okay, we're going to declare 2 arrays. One of days and one of sales. So, string, square brackets, days, like days of week, equals, curly brace, quote, short for Monday, end quote, comma, quote, 2, end quote, comma, as in Tuesday, quote, wed for Wednesday, end quote, comma, and then finally THU, Thursday, and that's about enough. I don't think I need to keep going, end quote, close curly brace. There we go. Now I'm going to make another array called sales. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-fill it with data rather than ask the user to enter this data. just for simplicity's sake of talking about this stuff. So int, square braces, sales equals, and I want 4 zeros in it. So I could just do this. New int subscript in subscript. It needs to be of the same length. I was tempted to put 0, 0, 0, 0 because that would be easy to type. But then when we went back in and we added Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we'd have to remember to modify this as well. So it's better to base it on the length of another array that's parallel to it. So days.length, I'm putting that inside the square brackets there. That makes absolutely sure it's the same length. I said I was going to pre-fill it with data. Phooey. I did not. Let's pre-fill it. I'm going to be totally lazy. No. We're gonna add the data by correctly. Sales subscript 0 equals, they earned $100 on Monday. May as well just copy that and paste it or something. Sales subscript 1 equals 150. Sales subscript 2 equals 90. Sales subscript 3 is equal to 150. Wouldn't it have been easier to just create an initializer list with those values? Yeah, it would, but rarely do you know the data in advance. This really should be an input loop where we ask the user for the value and we let them store it. I'm going to actually code the input loop just so that we know how to do it, but I don't want to have to type in something every time we run this, right? It gets very tedious when we have to keep running it over and over. Here's what that loop would look like. For parentheses, int I is equal to 0, semicolon. I is less than days.length or sales.length. They are the same length, semicolon. I plus plus, semicolon. And then a good old curly brace. We would ask the user for the value, system.out.println, quote, enter the sales for, and I should have made it a printf. I didn't, so I'm going to roll with it like this. So end quote plus days subscript I. Like that. And then we would use a scanner to get that value. Sales subscript I is equal to scanner, whatever we called it, right? Dot next int. And then a close brace. I should have used a multi-line comment so I wouldn't have to keep typing / over and over. You could uncomment that code, and if you declared a scanner, right, then it would work. Let's print our data out. I want to print it out so it says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Monday being 100, Tuesday being 150, and so on. What's this? Configure unbalanced read write with arrays hint. What in the heck? I'd never noticed that one. I'm going to ignore it. All right, in order to link these two arrays by their index number, we have to know the index. So we can't use a for each loop. The for each loop doesn't give us index values, indices. It just gives us values, so elements of the array. So for parentheses, we sure do type this a lot, int I equals 0. I is less than sales.length. Now if we had a partially filled array, we wouldn't want to go out to the end. But we've already talked about that. For int I is equal to 0. I is less than sales.length. I plus plus close parentheses. Let's use a printf so that we can make it pretty. System.out.printf, parentheses quote. The day is going to be 3 characters wide, so %3s. And the sales, well, let's put a $sign first. And then the sales, normally I'd do like, .2 because it's a floating point number, but for some reason I made these sales ints. Let's just say 4 characters wide. Nah, let's not specify a length. It's going to look okay. So, %d, because we're printing out integers, d stands for ints, not doubles. So, quote, %3s, $sign, %d, \n, end quote. And the arguments we want to fill in. The first argument is days, subscript I, and then comma, and the next one is sales, subscript I. And here we go. There's our data. Monday 100, Tuesday's 150, Wednesday's 90, Thursday's 150. We have a cute little function we wrote that'd find the largest value. Let's find the day with the largest sales. I better stop here. See how y'all are doing. I'm pretty sure that I've... Let's get the largest. Let's call our function. So this is going to be the index of the largest. I'm going to call it I for index. No, it's not. It's going to be the value of the largest. So int largest, or most, or whatever, right? Int most equals linear underscore search, parentheses. The name of our array is what? Which array are we searching? Sales, in parentheses, semicolon. And I'm getting an error. I didn't do find max. That's really what I'm looking for. Right? I'm looking for the max. Delete linear search. Find underscore max. So we can print that out. But we don't know the index, right? We could print the value out. System.out.print line parentheses quote biggest sale day, or biggest sale equals $sign, end quote, plus that value, most, right? But that doesn't tell us the day. I could find the index of the day by calling my linear search function. So int IMost for index, or IND, I don't know what I'm going to call it. I guess I'll call it IMost. Equals linear underscore search. We're searching the sales array, and we want to find the index position of largest sale. So sales, comma, most, in parentheses, semicolon. Now we know what day had the most. So we can print that out. System.out.println on, end quote, plus days, subscript, IMost. I'm not really fond of IMost as my variable name. I don't know why I'm pausing on it, but I'll just... Ought to be index underscore most. I just didn't feel like making it such a long variable. If this was a print rather than a print line, then it would display all the output on the same line. I feel like making that change. You don't have to. I'm changing the first print line to a print. And on the second one, I'm putting a space before the word on, just because I know what would happen if I didn't, which would be print the number and then print ON without a space between them. Normally I'd go back and revise that so it'd use printf. Okay, so the biggest sale was $150 on Tuesday. Whoops. Certainly could have done a better job of that. I think in my homework assignment I leave it vague enough that you could stop it with that. I don't think I specify that you have to get them all to work. But it's not that hard to do. You just have to rip through the array, checking to see if that value equals most. And if it does, then print that day. So I'm going to comment this out because it only prints one. Only prints the first occurrence. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to do another for int I is equal to 0 blah 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 loop. So I'm just going to copy that line. And what are we going to do? We're going to check to see if that particular day, if that value of that element matches most, because that's the largest value. So for int I is equal to 0, I less than sales.length, I plus plus, curly brace, if, parentheses, sales subscript I, end parentheses, equals most, end parentheses, then we're going to print out what day it is. System.out.print. I'm not going to use print line. Print the days subscript I, which day of the week it is, followed by just a space, right, to separate these things out a little bit. If there's only one day, it'll just print that one day out. If they all equal the same value, it'll print all the days out. Why did I make it print rather than print line? So it'll continue to print them all on the same line, right? Don't add this comment, I'm going to delete it, right? But it'll print $120 on Monday and Wednesday and Thursday, right, if they all were. I didn't want it to go to the next line to print Monday and the next line to print Wednesday and the next line to print Thursday. However, by the time we get here, we haven't gone to the next line yet. We haven't hit enter. So we have to have a final system.out.print line there. All right, so the biggest sale was on Tuesday and Thursday. I have that annoying space there. Somewhere I need to add an extra space to take care of that. So why not here? No, why not up here? Where I have the biggest sale equals $ plus most. Before the close parentheses, I'm just going to add a plus. And maybe the word on, right? Tells us what day it was. So plus, quote, let's put a space there. Plus, quote, space, on, space, end quote. Now our output should be nice and pretty. So the biggest sales were on Tuesday and Thursday. How would you find the sum of this? You'd just rip through it, adding them all up. I don't think that there's an arrays.sum feature that would allow us to cheat. Too bad, because Python has that. Same business, except we could use a for each loop to add up all the sales. So, but we need an accumulator. I like making my accumulator a floating point value. So total underscore sales, double space total underscore sales equals 0. And then make a loop that'll rip through it. For parentheses int E or V, I'm going to go with E for element, int E colon sales, end parentheses, total underscore sales plus equals E. Want to calculate the average? You just divide that by the length of the array. Double average equals total underscore sales divided by, so slash sales dot length, parentheses in parentheses. Nope, it's not a string, so you don't need those parentheses at the end. My mistake. And you can print them out. All right, I think I pretty much have given you the solution for the homework. Right? You've already done it and turned it in, so you know that's the case, right?
Me?
Yeah, pretty much have gotten it. Given you everything you need to know to do the homework. Is that a good statement? Let me go look at the homework, make sure that's the case. I don't want to border on giving you all the answers, but I think I may already have done so. All right. Ask the user how many numbers they want. Use that value to allocate an array named A1, looks like Al, I shouldn't have chosen that, of that length. Use a loop to fill it with random integers. Well, we better cover that. And display that with your own loop. Copy that into a new array, writing your own loop. Well, I didn't target this exactly precise after all, and we better do that. And then display it using arrays.toString, copy it into a third one, sort it, and then calculate and display the sum, the average, and the minimum and the max. Okay. Which homework?
But I did find that using the arrays.sort, you kind of don't have to really do finding the max.
Right, because you just go to 0 for the minimum and you go out to the other one for the max. Right, okay. This homework assignment doesn't exactly go with the lecture, because we've already spent an hour almost lecturing about this stuff, and we don't already know how to generate random numbers. All right, we're going to find out how to generate random numbers. Java random number. I'm just going to Google it up. All right. So, hey gang, let's print some random numbers. So, random space R&D equals new random. There's a class called random that you use to generate random numbers. And there's probably also a random number generator in the math class, but it's a far cruder one. So I'm going to go with this one. Cannot find symbol. Add import for java.util.random. All right. So, int a, comma b, comma c, comma d. Semicolon. A equals R&D dot next int I better check to see whether this limit is included or not included. Will it include 100 or is it not going to include 100? I think it's going to generate a number between 0 and 99. I'm not sure, so I'm going to right click and do show Java doc. Alright, so it starts at between 0, which is inclusive, and a specified value, which is exclusive. So if I do 1000, it's going to print out a number between 0 and 999. And just copy that and make it B equals and C equals and D equals so that we have 4 numbers. Do you really need that comment between 0 and 99 each time? Not really. And let's print them out. System.out.println parentheses A plus quote space end quote plus, and then just do that for B, C, and D, right? B plus quote space end quote. Yes, I should have used printf plus C plus space quote, excuse me, vice versa, plus quote space quote plus D. And there we go. We got some random numbers. 550, 969, 445, 882. And fortunately, they come preceded with a value. What does seed mean? This is really a pseudo-random number generator, meaning that it takes the last value that it calculated and it uses it through a mathematical formula to generate the next value, which you wouldn't be able to predict unless you had that formula. But the side effect is that if you start at the same value, you get the same series every time. Some languages, the random number generator, like in C++, sets its seed to the same value of 0, so it always generates the same sequence, and you have to set a new seed. If you want your functions to generate the same series every single time, not very random, right? Then you could do that. R&D dot set seed, and just pick a value, right? Doesn't matter. Now every single time it's going to start, as though it had generated a 1000, and then the next 4 numbers are going to be based on that 1000. So every single time I run it, it's going to print out 487,935. You would only do that if you're trying to test your program and you need identical data, right? Identical random data. Okay, I'm going to comment that out. Don't need that. You understand why it's there, though. Do this, and it will set or generate the same sequence every time. A different sequence based on whatever number you put in there. If you put in a 1, it'll generate a different sequence of numbers. Printing out the array, we know how to print it, but we haven't used arrays.toString today. Let's print our days array using arrays.toString. System.out.println parentheses arrays. Let me blow that up. Arrays.toString parentheses, and I'm going to print out the days array. Close parentheses, semicolon. And I could put the whatever array I wanted in there, right? Sales or colors or whatever I wanted. Names. Fast way of doing it. And it formats it like that. Puts square braces around it. Separates them by commas. Kind of nice. Or you can use a for index-based for loop or a for each loop to print them out. How do we copy the data into a new array? Let's make a sales2 array. It's the same type, int sales2. I forgot the square braces. Int square and square sales2 equals new int, and it has to be the same length as the sales array, or else we couldn't. Copy all the elements into it. So new int square sales.length Then you just need a for loop. It's going to print them into it. So it's going to be yet another for int I equals 0, etc. loop. For parentheses int I equals 0, I less than sales2 dot length. So I less than sales2 dot length, semicolon, I plus plus, curly brace, sales2 subscript I equals sales subscript I, right? So we're just copying each value item by item into the other array. And we can print it out. I'm going to print it out with arrays.toString. System.out.println parentheses system.out.println parentheses arrays.toString parentheses sales2 close parentheses semicolon. And I have a spare close parentheses semicolon down here that snuck in, deleting it now. All right, and there's our sales again. All right, I'm going to modify the homework a little bit. We're going to make it 2 separate assignments. And you're going, yay, but we are. Okay, so that's part 1. Arrays.copyOf and arrays.sort. We did that last week, so can I leave it alone? And then homework for one-dimensional array part 2. Create 2 parallel arrays. One for names, the other for scores. So string names, string square braces names is equal to, and then just fill it with some names, right? Fred, end quote, comma, Barney, end quote, comma, Wilma, end quote, comma, Betty, end quote, comma, etc. Write a loop that will let the user enter. Okay, so you better allocate another array called scores of ints named scores for each name into the scores array. Find out the largest value in the scores array. Don't sort it because then it's no longer a parallel array. And print the names of the students with the scores that match that value. The only thing different about this than what we already did with the sales is that we didn't write a loop that'll do the data entry. And I trust that y'all can do that, and if you get stuck, text me and I'll show you how. Or email me, right? Let's make a Dropbox so we can bail. While I'm doing that, does anybody have any questions over the homework? I wish we had additional time after the class was over to hang out and talk about homework. I really ought to make the lectures only an hour long so we can do that, but we're only meeting once a week, so that doesn't really work. All right, so this goes into Dropbox F. Except we didn't talk about 2D arrays. We didn't talk about sorting. Almost sounding like this should have been Dropbox E. Is that actually a correct statement? Is that really where we are? Did we put anything into E? Had I already talked about parallel arrays last time? Did I blow it? And all right.
We had talked about them, but, I mean, I think these were there to be.
Okay. And searching, finding max, averaging, etc. That's enough. Okay. All right. There's yonder Dropbox now. And this homework assignment, homework 5, really goes along more closely with F than it does with E, so I'm going to move it down to the F folder.
Wait, where is it? The Dropbox that says that for homework? Is it just the F parallel?
That's a Dropbox for today, right? We're on day F, if I recall correctly. And then there's a homework assignment underneath it now.
It looked like a homework description.
I'm sorry, pardon me?
It looked like a homework description.
Yeah, this is arranged slightly different than my other classes because I'm putting the homework directly under the lecture that spawned it. All right, any questions?
Oh, syntax error, if you go to
Oh,
the-
yeah.
I can't see what, it says I made a,
Looks like they just, what's that? Quote. Oh, you put a plus sign right before the quote. Sorry about that. Just like you were putting plus signs between every element in print up there.
okay. I didn't say that. Now I don't do that. All right, good, thank you.
Sure. Who else needs eyeballs on their screen?
I'm good. Already turned it.
Class.
in everything.
It's okay that you don't have it all typed in, right? But I'll print it out for you anyways.